So welcome to the Logistics Point interviews. Today I'm joined by Benjamin Hamilton from Octopia Fulfilment. He's the director of fulfillment, and surprisingly, we're talking about fulfillment. Ben, thank you very much for joining me today.
No problem, Nick. Happy to
The
be here.
first thing I think is when we are looking into the last 18 months, COVID obviously has changed a lot. When we're talking about fulfillment and COVID, how do you think the change? What do you think is the change?
Yeah, sure. It's a really interesting question. And I think what we've seen, it'll come as no surprise to our audience. What we've seen in e-commerce is the sort of great leap forward, jumping forward sort of 5 to 10 years or so in the space of a year, 18 months, 2 years. What I think, in contrast to that, what maybe hasn't leapt forward is sort of global supply chains. And so we've got a bit of a delta going on between like a huge increase in demand, but a bit of a bottleneck when it comes to the sort of supply chain and logistics level, which is understandable. I think what we've seen is it's difficult to navigate that for all actors. It's a little bit easier to navigate if you're like a big actor with lots of resources. If you're for example a small to medium-sized business, it's been a really difficult time. You've been sort of faced with sort of in some areas sort of really burgeoning demand, but actually really difficult on the operational and logistics front. So a bit of a sort of dichotomy going on. Maybe the second point, and it's perhaps slightly less linked to COVID, is I think another thing we've seen is the huge growth of marketplaces. And then sort of if you look at sort of e-commerce growth as a whole, obviously it's very, very strong, but it's largely underlined by the growth of marketplaces. And I think what we've seen is, basically sales channels all over the place have recognized this, and all across Europe, all across the world, are sort of starting to say, okay, well, I'm going to make my marketplace for my particular niche, whether it's, barbecue equipment, sauna equipment, sports equipment, whatever, which is really, really interesting and great from a consumer perspective. What we're seeing now is some of those sort of early marketplace actors starting to identify the importance of having a strong fulfillment service linked to their marketplace.
And you talk about trends, but if you're trying to look into the future, maybe next year or the years after that, what do you think is reshaping the market, and how will companies try to adjust to it?
Yeah, there's a couple of things for me. The first one, not revolutionary, but it's no secret that sort of cross-border is becoming the new normal. And that sort of increasingly people who maybe 2 years ago would never have ordered something online, maybe a year ago they're happy to order something online from their own country. Now they're happy to order something online from a completely new country or a completely new sales channel. Obviously, that's got big implication from a sort of operational perspective for small businesses when they're selling stuff in other countries. And I think that's one trend that's really sort of starting to reshape the market and will continue over the next few years. I guess if I take that example and put myself in the perspective of someone selling online, what they don't necessarily want in that case is to have a different piece of software for every different sales channel that they're using in every different country. And they don't necessarily want different bits of stock dotted around the world, all controlled by different bits of software. It's extremely time consuming if that's the case, and you open yourself up to all sorts of operational risks in the sense that you've got to be sort of demand forecasting in different geographies all simultaneously. It can be quite messy. So I think, once again, when we come to fulfillment, a good fulfillment provider is someone who deals with all that complexity for you, who would offer someone selling online a single piece of software, as we do, where you can sort of see all of your stock, wherever it is, all in one place. You can connect easily to your different sales channels, and you save a huge amount of time and money just by having it all in one place.
And you mentioned software, and automation is something, the word technology, automation, software, all of these words sometimes sound scary to people. Can it be done quickly and not very expensive, or does it always has to take a lot of time and a lot of money?
I think the question for me is yes, it might be expensive, it might be slow, but who's paying for it, and who's benefiting from it? First, maybe before addressing that, which is the first thing to sort of note, is that often when we think of fulfillment and logistics, we think about really old school stuff like lorries driving up and down motorways, containers on cargo ships. But fundamentally, it's a tech industry. Like the amount of information flow that has to be going on around the world to enable a good quality of service, to enable sellers and end users to track where a small package is anywhere in the world at any moment in time, is phenomenal. So actually, it's slightly misunderstood. Actually, sometimes you think of fulfillment as a sort of get your parcel in the lorry, but actually it's fundamentally a tech subject. And then to answer your question about automation, then for me, there's maybe sort of a couple of different types of automation we could think of. The first one is sort of automation in the sense of what we've just said about cross-border. So if you're selling, if you're a small business and you're selling on multiple different sort of e-commerce sales channels, you want to be able to automate the way in which information about those sales flows into your warehouse or logistics solution. Yes, you do want the reassurance of being able to do it manually if all else fails, but ideally you don't want to be checking all of your sales channels every few hours and sending the orders over to your warehouse to get them fulfilled. You ideally want to be connected via an API, which is going to suck all of the information from your sales channels, put it into the warehouse, and then once that parcel goes out for delivery, brings all of the tracking information back to you, so that you know everything that's going on at any one time. To answer your question, can that be done sort of easily and cheaply? Again, the answer is, well, ideally, someone else has done it for you, and that's what we try to propose. We in the solution that we've got our portals connected to our warehouses, is connected to the transporters. At the other end, it's easy for a vendor or a seller to connect it to their sales channels, and therefore they can see everything. They don't need to worry too much about investing in all of the complicated tech needed to make that happen. Maybe the other sort of bit of automation is the sort of hard physical stuff that you might see in a warehouse, and for that, there's, I guess, multiple different reasons why you want to have automation in your sort of warehouses or in your supply chain. If something's automated well, it should be saving time and money in terms of the processes. B, also, it's probably better for warehouse staff as well. Ideally, you don't want warehouse staff getting injured because they're handling heavy products, and it's something with our logistics providers that we take very seriously as well. Again, it's something which requires actually huge investment and huge sort of lead times to put in place.
How can we make fulfillment greener?
It's really interesting that you say greener, because it's the right way to say it. We're not a green industry, and we should be honest with ourselves about that. I think if you sort of do a back of the envelope sort of calculation and look at the number of parcels that fly around Europe or fly around the world every year, we're in the billions. And if you think about, make a few assumptions about how far each one of those travels, you quickly get to a distance which it takes you well outside of our solar system into sort of neighboring galaxies. So the figures really are astronomical. So I think the first thing is to be honest with ourselves. We're not working in a green industry, which means we've got a huge responsibility to take every step we can to make ourselves greener. I think that the tailwind which is going to help us is the fact that end customers, more and more, are really alert to this. And I'm sure there are figures to back it up, but I think if anyone anecdotally goes and sort of chats to their friends, it would be easy to find people who say how shocked they are every time a parcel arrives, which is 5 times bigger than the size of the iPhone it contains, or they would say, hey, look, actually I'm prepared to wait longer or even spend a bit more for a delivery which I know is more sustainable or which is cleaner for the environment. And so, for example, and actually, so that's super important for end customers. Anything that's important for an end customer is important for a seller, for a marketplace, and therefore for a logistician as well. And so there's maybe two levels. With our sort of logistics providers, when we pick them, we look very carefully at their sort of sustainability credentials. And a lot of them have some really fantastic initiatives, like fleets of electric vehicles, increasing amount of train transport for intercity deliveries, 3D packaging to ensure that, you know, with a single parcel, the package around the outside is going to be within 1 centimeter of the dimensions of the product. All those sorts of things are really, really good. But even that, to be honest, is just scratching the surface. I think really we need to be in a position where we're offering the final customer the ability to choose something, a delivery mode, for example, which is carbon neutral. Where in the same way that, you know, when you sort of make when you book a plane ticket sometimes nowadays, you can tick a box which says, you know, I want to offset my carbon emissions. I think that's the direction we need to be heading in the fulfillment industry, and it's something we're looking at very closely at Octopia Fulfilment as well.
Thank you very much for this. And for people watching, they can learn a bit more about what you do and also more about green initiatives and fulfillment in general in the description down below. Thank you.